So we are comparing hand clap games to what we do here in the U.S. and what they do in Brazil. And please show them this one you just did. And we go double this, double that, double this, double that, double this, that. And they say you do this.
I forgot about that. Okay. That is shame.
And we go. Shame. I don't want to go to Mexico no more. There's a big fat policeman at my door. He grabbed me by the collar. He made me pay $1. I don't want to go to Mexico no more. Shame on you.
Hi lovelies, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Belinda Verse or Chant. Don't forget to please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so that anytime I upload videos, you will be the first person to be notified. To my returning subscribers, to those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and educate each and every one of us, you guys are the real MVP. So lovelies, I'm gonna be your today's host, and I have so many statistics to put up here, and we are gonna come out to talk about it. Alright lovelies, let's dive into today's video.
For generations, Black kids sat across each other, chanting and clapping. Shame, shame, shame. I don't want to go to no more. But the shame game actually had Black kids chanting about police, harassment, and more without even realizing it. Here's why the history of this game runs deep. I don't want to go to county jail no more. It's a big fat policeman at the door. He'll snatch you by the collar, make you pay $1. I don't want to go to county jail no more. These 2002 lyrics from Project Pat's County Jail ring familiar for generations of Black children. Because the hand clapping game they're based on, Shame, has an extensive history. It perhaps begins with Macy's Doggerel, where, in response to cops routinely harassing women at Macy's, early 1900s New York City children chanted, I don't want to go to Macy's anymore, more. Over time, Black girls nationwide evolved the lyrics to their regions and vernacular language. But why? Ethnomusicologist Kira Gaunt says it's kinetic orality. They're responding to institutionalized anti-Blackness through everyday playground phenomena. When their parents share the latest news or talk about how they're being treated, kids are overhearing, she explains. One way to alleviate the anxiety is to make games about them. Play will always reflect the times. Over the past several generations, the violence of policing has intermingled with expressions of childhood joy. But in a liberated future, Black children won't have to warn each other through games. Shame's policeman will no longer be a pressing threat.
Follow at Push Black Justice for more critical stories and events about the U.S. criminal legal system.
Amina Galea, Simolea, Amina One Chant, Pio Box, Maradela, Boom Pepe.
Concentration, 60 fun, no repeats or hesitation. I get first and I'll go second. Topic is animals. Animals. W.
So the feedback from the Black people using O was insane. There were so many examples from countries that I didn't even think about. There were so many examples that I didn't think about. It was actually insane to see how connected we really are with using O. I just thought I had a little hypothesis, but you guys definitely were proving my point in the comments. Thank you so much for that. But one thing I did realize when people were talking in the comments, a lot of people brought it up, was that we also suck our teeth as well. And that one is, I feel like it's way more universal than O is. What I mean by universal is everybody knows what sucking teeth means. Whether you're disappointed, whether you're mad, whether you were pissed off, it's the go-to. And the emphasis on how long it is usually how mad, disappointed, pissed off you are. So a nice little kind of mad. And now along, it means you really pissed off. And let me tell you, I don't think there is a black person in any ethnicity of the black diaspora who can do that in front of an adult and get away with it. You see what I'm saying? Like, we all know what that means. We all have like a different type, whether it's or the long. We all do it. It's really insane. And since we're on the topic of the things that we kind of do with our mouths, like gestures, also kind of pointing with our lips, a lot of people do that. A lot of people do that. It's crazy. We all know that one time where we can't really talk to each other. We can't really say anything. So the only thing you can do is, Betty. You know what I mean? Wow. Now that I'm thinking about it, there's actually a lot of things that are pretty universal when it comes to being black. And I hope, I'm probably going to start a little series to kind of highlight some of them, but it's going to take a lot of research and a lot of time too, because I really, really love learning about different cultures, and so many of you guys have highlighted different cultures that I definitely need to read and study about.
We are comparing hand clap games to what we do here.
I love this so much. It is so absolutely beautiful to me, because while we are going through a diaspora war, we still family. And we can argue amongst ourselves. Y'all mind y'all business. And us black Americans, we love. We tried to make the Pan-African movement work. We tried. But that's not what we're on today. This is a positive and happy. So my mission for today, because they didn't play slide, and I commented on that post, I said, please ask them if they have a version of slide, and if they do, can you please share it? But my mission today is to find somebody to play slide with me and record it. Because I'm good at slide. I remember, it's been so long since I played Shame. But I'm sure if you gave me one walkthrough, muscle memory would kick in, the DNA would kick in, and I get it, because I know shame. I don't want. I just need a quick run through. But I'm talking about slide, because they didn't do slide, and I was waiting for slide, because I just knew they was going to do slide. Today, I'm going to find someone to play slide with me. Yeah, that's my mission.
We do know that black people are both African and indigenous American, right? We know that millions of indigenous people were enslaved on North American soil, and some sent to the Caribbean and West Indies, and most being women and children. We knew that, right? We know that only about 500,000 slaves came from the Atlantic slave trade, and only 5% of all enslaved Africans came to North America. We do know that, right? I think one issue that people have with this topic is that they conflate the Americas with the United States, when in reality, the Americas includes South America, the West Indies, the Caribbeans, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. I think another issue people have with this topic is that they don't realize that the United States didn't always belong to the United States. The United States only started off as 13 colonies. And these colonies used to belong to Britain. Not only that, the majority of slavery was only in the southern states. Slavery started in the Carolinas. The 7 proprietors who started slavery in the Carolinas came from the Caribbean, Barbados to be exact. So the vast majority of slaves in the American colonies, the British colonies, they still belong to Britain at this point, didn't come until the establishment of the Carolinas in the 1660s. In Barbados, there was already chattel slavery. So when the proprietors started the establishment of the Carolinas, they brought chattel slavery with them. Not only did they bring chattel slavery with them, they brought the idea of the enslavement of American Indians as well. This in itself would have to be a whole video, but basically this led to the Yamasee Wars of 1717, which is an American Indian group who fought with Carolinian settlers and basically was the start of racism in the colonies. A sage mentality was born. Oh, and let's not forget that lots of slaves were captured from Florida at this time, and Florida belonged to Spain until 1820. They were also enslaved and or sold to the Caribbeans and the West Indies. The rest of America was split between the Spanish and the French. All of this yellow part right here belonged to the French between 1520 and 1763. It was split into Lower Louisiana, which is where we know as Louisiana, then like Illinois County would be the middle of the country, and then Upper County, which was like the Great Lakes and whatnot. After 1763, which was after the 7 Years' War between the French and the British, all of the Great Lakes became British colony property. Also, the French sold their colonies to Spain. So Louisiana was owned by the Spanish from 1763 to 1803. And then briefly it was sold back to the French for like 6 months and then sold to America in what is known as the Louisiana Purchase. You can see we have Lower Louisiana, Upper Louisiana, which is Illinois County, and Upper County. The French enslaved tens of thousands of American Indians between the late 1600s and the early 1700s. The reason behind this is, for one, the French were broke. They were spending too much money on the development of other slave colonies, as well as wars with Britain. You had the Anglo-French War of 1627, and then the King William's Wars of 1689. That was just one of 4 wars. Yeah, they didn't have money to bring African slaves to the American colonies. So they enslaved lots of American Indians. The second reason this was made possible is because they had good relationships with certain American Indian tribes, mainly the Chickasaw, right? The Chickasaw captured thousands of Natchez people, sold them to the French settlers. Not just the Natchez, but the Choctaw too, and the Indians of the lower Mississippi Valley, as well as the Arkansas, Tanika, the Tonka, which in reality are all considered Natchez people. And you can look up the Natchez War of 1729 for historical reference. It wasn't until 1689 the French outlawed the use of Indian slaves. But like I said, the French were broke. So people continued to capture Indian slaves. They started calling them servants to avoid law. And then the rest of them, mainly men, they would sell to the South Carolinas, and the South Carolinas would sell them to the Caribbeans. But women and children were kept. It wasn't until the establishment of New Orleans in 1717 that New France got their first major shipment of African slaves. It really wasn't even that many. It was about 6,000. The increasingly volatile relationships between France and the American Indian tribes of North America are a large reason why they sold to the Spanish in 1763. French Louisiana and French Louisiana were vastly different. For one, the French were a lot like Britain, and they believed in chattel slavery. Well, slaves were born into slavery after capture, and they lived their entire lives. But, it's told that the French were nicer to their slaves than the British because they had slaves living in the home, and they treated them more as kin. They gave them, religion and identity through whatever superficial shit they called slaves. Spanish slavery, on the other hand, was vastly different. The Spanish believed that slaves had inherent rights. So a slave could sue their master for improper treatment. Also, by the time that the Spanish had bought the Louisiana territory, they had outlawed American Indian slavery. So slaves, or Indian slaves particularly, would sue their masters in court for their manumission, which is their freedom, I guess. That's why there's so many historical records of, mixed race people or slaves suing their masters in Louisiana, because when Louisiana was taken over by the Spanish, it gave slaves, American Indians, and all types of people all types of rights in courts. This angered the French settlers because they were used to chattel slavery. They did not believe that slaves had inherent rights. So eventually, because Spain couldn't get their territory together, they sold it back to France, and France, still being in debt, sold it to the United States. Then we have the rest of the United States, which belonged to Spain, and the Spanish also enslaved thousands of indigenous people all throughout New Spain, which is, modern day Mexico, Texas, California, New Mexico, etc. Spanish had these things called encomiendas, which gave like a lord land, and then in that land, all of the Indians around it became his property, or encomiendes, which is workers. So yeah, that practice continued from like the late 1400s to like the late 1500s. There was an official law put on the books to stop it, but even then it persisted. And then New Mexico broke off from Spain. They continued the enslavement of Indians. And then Texas broke off from New Mexico. They continued the enslavement of Indians. And then California broke off from Mexico, and they also continued the enslavement of Indians. And then one way or another, all of this land became U.S. territory. Chattel slavery took over everywhere that there was slavery allowed. And so American Indians were transported interregionally between states. And so eventually they were all just mixed in, all just considered Negro slaves, which created what we now know today as Black America. Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, honestly, this could literally be a 10-part series. If you guys want to know more, let me know. But this is like basically a general summary of it. Just for a recap, we got chattel slavery in the American colonies, chattel slavery of Indians in the French colony, type of weird religious slavery of Indians in the Spanish colonies, and then the intermingling mixing of slavery as everything became U.S. territory in the Americas. There you have it. Black people are both African and indigenous.
We are comparing hand clap games. So what we do here.
Now, if y'all pay attention to that video, right? And if we are part of diasporas, the Americas, or whatever, a lot of these traditions and a lot of these things that we did were ways to communicate. I don't know if y'all have grasped that if you pay attention to that video. And if you listen to the songs, of course these songs have changed throughout time. But listen to the lyrics that are said. Things are coming into fruition, and I need y'all to link and get in sync, because this fallacy of whiteness would change everything. Black means nothing. White means nothing. And I wish people would fucking get that. Because once y'all grasp that, then you will understand white privilege. Now I got to go and get myself together, get my wig on, and get ready for my day.
So black kids sitting across from each other, nails almost touching, palms clapping in rhythm, chanting, I don't wanna go to county jail no more. More. It's a big bad policeman at the door. And for most of us, that was just a game. Just rhythm, just vibes, just something to pass time at recess. But when you really sit with those lyrics, when you really think about it, you realize something heavy. Why were black children chanting about jail? Why were they chanting about police? Why did we know that a big bad policeman was before we even understood algebra? That is not random, that is history. And the hand clapping game, often called shame, didn't just appear out of the thin air. A lot of scholars traces versions of it back to the early 90s New York, including a chant sometimes referred to as mercy, where children sang about not wanting to go to mercy anymore after police harassed women around the store. Over time, black girls across the country reshaped it. The lyrics changed depending on the city, the slang shifted, the rhythm evolved, but the theme stayed familiar. Authority, harassment, punishment, jail, that tells you something. Musicologists, Karakilin, and scholars like Karagut have studied how black girls use what Guild calls kinetic orality, using body, rhythm, and voice together to process what is happening around them. That means these aren't just games. They are embodying storytelling. They are social commentary in motion. Kids hear things. They hear their parents whispering about someone getting locked up. They hear the tension when police lights flash behind the car. They hear the news. They hear the fear. And when you are a child and you don't have political language yet, you process it through play. That is what is so powerful and so heartbreaking about this, because for generations, black childhood, joy, and state violence have existed in the same breath. We were clapping and laughing, but we were also rehearsing survival. And here's where it gets even deeper. Those 2002 lyrics from Project Pat County Jail sound almost identical to the playground chant. That connection isn't accidental. Hip hop has always sampled the streets, and the streets include children. There is a loop between childhood, games, and adult reality. What the adults live becomes what the kids chant. What the kids chant becomes what artists echo. Culture is circular like that. But the bigger question is, what does it say about a society when its black children are internalizing jail as normal? Not as an extreme, not as real, but as expected. I don't want to go to county jail no more. That line only works if going to jail feels like a real possibility. And for black communities in America, it has been. Mass incarceration didn't just affect adults. It shaped households, it shaped neighborhoods, it shaped conversation at dinner tables, and kids absorb all of it. So when people say it's just a game, I understand the instance. We want childhood to be innocent. We want to play to be free from politics. But black childhood has rarely been insulated from politics. And here is something else that is important. This isn't only about trauma, it's about creativity. Black children didn't just repeat fear, they transformed it. They turned anxiety into reading. They turned institutional violence into choreography. They turned big bad policeman into something you could clap through, laugh through, survive through. That is resiliency. Now let's shift slightly, because what makes this even more interesting is how universal certain black expressions are across the diaspora. In the same way, that the shame game evolved from city to city, country to country, so do our gestures. Take sucking teeth, that is sharp, intentional, sleek. You don't need translation, you don't need substitute, you don't need contents. Whether you are in Nigeria, Jamaica, Atlanta, London, Trinidad, South Africa, you know what that means. Disappointment, disapproval, annoyance, sometimes pure range, and the length matters. A short, you are middling irritated. A long dramatic, you are done. And what is funny is no black child anywhere in the diaspora could do that in front of an elder and not immediately understand the consequences. It's communication without words. It's just like lip pointing. You ever notice how we can indicate an entire direction with just our mouth, no finger, no obvious gesture, just a substitute point with the lips, and other persons immediately knows who or what you are talking about? That is shared language, that is shared coding, that is diaspora memory in action. When people in the comments started connecting, oh, that is expressive, elongated, oh, across cultures, it reveals something deeper. This hasn't coincidence. They are cultural survival. They traveled through slavery, through migration, through colonization, through segregation. Our ancestors carried rhythm and gesture even when everything else was stripped away. So when you look at the shame game and you look at sucking teeth and you look at lip pointing, you are actually looking at a map of continuity, a map of adaptation, a map of black people finding ways to communicate across oceans and centuries. And here's the thing that really gets me. Play always reflect the times. In one generation, kids might chant about school crushes. In another generation, they chant about jail. What does that say about what felt pressing? When children incorporate police into their games, that tells you police presence wasn't abstract, it wasn't theoretical, it was felt. And yet, despite that, there is joy in those clapping circles. There is laughter, there is community, there is synchronized system rhythm that requires cooperation and trust. Black girls especially have historically been the architects of these games. Their hands, their rhythms, their innovation builds playground culture, and often their contribution go uncredited. But these games are archive. They are oral history. They are grassroots sociology, and they deserve to be studied with the same seriousness as written tests. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Some people hear this analysis and immediately think making everything about race, but the reality is race was already there. It was there in policy patterns. It was there in the incarceration rate. It was there in who got followed in stores. It was there in whose neighborhoods had constant surveillances. Children didn't invent that. They responded to it. That is a huge difference. And when we imagine a liberated future, when we imagine black children not needing to chant about jail, that is not about erasing culture. It's about removing threats. Imagine a version of that game where the big bad policeman doesn't exist as a looming fear, where jail isn't normalized, where children don't subconsciously rehearse state violence in their leisure time. That would be real freedom. But because here is the truth, culture can reflect oppression, but it can also outlive it. The shame game survived generations because black children kept adapting it the same way we adapt language, the same way we adapt music, the same way hip-hop samples the past and makes it new. And that is why this conversation hit so hard. It wasn't just non-telegial, it was recognition. Because recognition that we have been connected in ways we didn't fully articulate. Recognition that our gestures, our sounds, our chants carry more history than we realize. And it's beautiful and heavy at the same time because beautiful because it shows continuity, heavy because it shows what we had to normalize. When you zoom out, you see a pattern. When you take that harm, we take what harms us, we remix it, we encode it, we survive it. That is what black culture has always done. And the fact that people across country flooded the comment with their own versions of this sound and gesture proves something powerful. The diaspora is not random. There is shared memory there, shared reading, shared instinct, even when separated by language, by borders, by passports. So yes, let's talk about the shame game. But let's also talk about the brilliancy embedded inside it, because black children wasn't passive. They were observing, interpreting, transforming. They were doing sociology without knowing the word. They were doing therapy without access to therapists. They were doing political commentary without a microphone. Through claps, through chants, through a quiet point of the lips. And maybe the most radical thing about all of this is that joy precipitated anyway. That is the part people miss. Despite surveillances, despite over-policing, despite incarceration shaping community, there were still circles of girls laughing insane. There were still coded gestures passing across classrooms. There were still reading, and reading is survival. If there is one thing this trendy conversation shows, is that black culture is layered. Nothing is just one thing. A game is never just a game. A sound is never just a sound. It's history in disguise. And when we start paying attention to small things, the playground chants, the mouth gestures, the substitute clues, we start uncovering entire stories about who we are, where we have been, and how deeply connected we remain. That is not accidental. That is legacy.
And if you watched up to this extent, don't forget to please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So lovelies, why not just share your thought? Subscribe to this channel if you're yet to do that, and I will see you lovelies when I upload the next one.